Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Wednesday, July 30th, and we have got Meta and Microsoft reporting earnings tonight. We are going to get to that. I should say before we start, Mark Zuckerberg just released a clip this morning with some more color about how he is thinking about superintelligence. You can find that on our social feeds. But today on the show, we have got the founders of two of the fastest growing autonomous trucking and AI healthcare companies, two separate companies, I should say. The founders of those companies are coming on the show. We are also talking about a big scoop from our finance team about the revenue projections of a big startup taking on NVIDIA. And we are closing out the show by talking about the AI agent wars in the land of e-commerce. Now, before we start, I want to talk about two big headlines coming out of our own newsroom. Cohere, the Canadian AI company competing with Anthropic and OpenAI, they are talking to investors about raising money at a $6.3 billion valuation. That is a 25% jump from the last valuation it got a year ago. The company expects to generate more than $200 million in annualized revenue by the end of this year. And the second funding scoop that we had is that crypto exchange Kraken is looking to raise $500 million at a $15 billion valuation. That is up from the $11 billion valuation that it fetched back in 2022. Of course, crypto has changed a lot in 3 years, but that scoop comes from our Dealmaker newsletter that goes out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so be sure to check that out. Couple other headlines for you before we get started. Palo Alto Networks is buying identity management company CyberArk for $25 billion. Palo Alto Networks hasn't traditionally done as much in the software space related to logins. Okta, Microsoft, and Cisco, these are some of the companies that have. This is clearly a play from Palo Alto to start diving into that login space. So we will see how that shakes out. I mentioned Meta and Microsoft are reporting tonight. The big thing to pay attention to with Meta, I mentioned Mark Zuckerberg, his comments this morning. Whether or not he says anything about all the gobs of money that he is spending on AI, that will be the thing to listen for on the call tonight. At Microsoft, we said it yesterday, but it's all eyes on Azure. Azure growth accelerated last quarter to 33%. And so if it can top that, that will be something worth paying attention to. Okay, let's get to our first guest. We have written a lot at The Information about how chip companies are vying to take on NVIDIA. One of the best-known startups in that space is Groq, not to be confused with xAI's Grok chatbot. This is Groq with a Q. The company has been in talks to raise money at a $6 billion valuation, but we were first to report this week that the company has had to revise its revenue projections. And I want to bring on Miles Krupa, the reporter who broke that story, to tell us more about what he's found out. Miles, welcome to TITV.
Thanks, Akash.
So tell us, what did you learn about Groq?
Well, what we learned really is that after having given out these fairly high revenue projections early in the year, they said that they were expecting a bit over $2 billion in revenue this year. That more recently, when fundraising, they've been telling investors they're expecting closer to $500 million in revenue. And so that's a very big difference. And we tried to get to the bottom of it. And what the company ended up telling us is that they shifted some of their revenue expectations to 2026 because of a requirement that they deliver their chips to certain data centers in a certain region, but basically that the data centers weren't ready to accept the chips. Grok recognizes revenue upon delivery, and so because of that, they have pushed back their revenue projections into next year.
So they're telling you that it's kind of a capacity issue, that the data centers are what's holding them back from getting that revenue. Is that right?
That's right. And while they didn't specifically point to Saudi Arabia as the reason for this, the context basically is that in February of this year, around the time they gave out the projections, they had signed a big new contract with Aramco Digital, which is part of Aramco, the Saudi oil company. Saudi Arabia is undergoing a major push to open data centers and go big on AI. But there are lots of competing initiatives in Saudi Arabia right now. They're spending a lot of money on Neom, for instance, their big futuristic city in the desert. And they've also started importing chips from AMD and NVIDIA. And so there's just a lot going on right now in Saudi Arabia. And that's sort of been the cornerstone of Grok's business. So, while Grok wouldn't say that Saudi Arabia was to blame here, it's possible to draw the conclusion that something's going on there.
I want to come back to Saudi Arabia and sort of the demand element, but let's talk about Grok more fundamentally. I mean, this is one of many NVIDIA challengers. Grok has gotten a lot of funding. What makes Grok different, and why are investors so bullish on the company?
Yeah, there are a few different companies that have raised a lot of money trying to develop AI chips that can compete with NVIDIA's. What's interesting about Grok, this was a company founded about a decade ago. Jonathan Ross, the CEO, worked on Google's internal AI chip, the TPU, which is widely viewed as a huge success. Um, and what they've come up with is a sort of different architecture to what NVIDIA does. And Grok is really focused on inference. So they're focused on trying to run AI models as quickly and cheaply as possible. Um, the other thing to know about Grok is that its chips really work in systems of sort of hundreds. So you have to link together a few hundreds of them to get the performance of a few NVIDIA chips.
Hmm.
Once you do, the company claims they run a lot faster and a lot more efficiently.
Hmm. So, I mean, let's come back to sort of the revenue projections. This is a pretty big change in my view. I guess what I'm wondering is it common for companies to change their revenue figures so drastically in this space?
I wouldn't say it's super common. Clearly, hardware companies have a different set of challenges than software companies do. The marginal cost of building a new unit of software is close to zero, whereas hardware has all these questions about supply chain. And in the case of a company like Grok, clearly, are there physical buildings where you can put your hardware that are ready to accept the chips? Um, I will say Grok is currently fundraising. When a company is fundraising, usually they're trying to tell investors that we beat expectations, that we're ahead of projections. So, I think it's safe to say that this is not ideal for Grok. Um, Another thing that this kind of reminded me of was the SPAC boom of a few years ago. You would see companies come out with these very optimistic projections to entice public investors, become public companies, and then frequently miss those revenue targets or sales targets. And so it just feels like that might also be another uh, sort of example to point to of where we might see this kind of thing.
Yeah, and look, I think it's a good point. That you mentioned about this sort of being similar to the SPAC boom. Let's take a step back a bit. I mean, your beat at the information is covering AI and financing, and so when you think about that and this context in the story of that, I mean, what kind of themes are you focused on right now as a reporter?
Yeah, the sort of big question is basically where's the money for AI going to come from? And I think it's clear just in the few months that I've been here that the Middle East is going to be a huge part of that. Saudi Arabia ramping up its AI efforts with a new company called Humane. They're starting a $10 billion venture fund. We know they're in talks with Grok about investing. Um, I think the sort of rising stature of the Middle East in AI, not to mention Abu Dhabi,
Hmm.
that's a huge theme, something I'm going to be watching closely. Um, and then I think also, just more broadly, this kind of question of whether NVIDIA's dominance in AI chips can continue and for how long. With companies like Grok growing fast and winning new customers, with companies like AMD trying very hard to get their chips in the hands of more AI developers. helping to start companies like TensorWave, which is sort of the core weave of AMD.
Mm.
These are just some really interesting themes, and I'm going to be, I think, spending a lot of time on chips over the next few months.
Before I let you go, we talked about how Grok is sort of, framing this as a supply issue, or rather a capacity issue, I should say, in terms of its ability to, deliver. Um, I just want to come back to the demand side because you mentioned the contract with Saudi Arabia. It's a $1.5 billion contract. That was supposed to be conceivably a large part of that revenue projection that it had initially put forward. Outside of the Saudi contract, what kind of a sense are you getting in terms of what demand customers have for Grok's chips?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are kind of two different prongs of the business. Um, Basically, Grok had almost no revenue in 2023. It was not having an easy time selling its chips directly to other companies. And so it created this cloud business that lets you run open source models like Llama on Grok hardware. And so that business is growing nicely, although it's not profitable. So they have some customers like Dropbox that are using open source models on Grok hardware through that service. And then they're doing these kind of partnerships or direct sales, like they're doing with Saudi Arabia. Another one is Bell Canada, which is building some data centers with Grok chips to serve Canadian customers. Um, and then Grok is also just going out and filling data centers with Grok chips in anticipation of bigger demand. They
Right.
just built a big data center in Finland, I believe. They're moving forward full steam ahead, anticipating there will be great demand for their chips.
Well, great. Look, it's a fascinating story to cover, and I will say that you know it's not just Grok. We've got a database of all the all AI chip companies that are taking on NVIDIA, and so we will link that in the show notes because there's companies like Nova, like Cerebras. We had a scoop about them. Smaller companies like D Matrix. All these companies are out there fundraising right now, and so I look forward to having you back on the show, Miles, to talk about those companies. Thank you so much for being here with us. That is Miles Krupa on our finance team here at The Information. Now, autonomous vehicles have been all the rage lately. You've got Waymo, you've got Tesla, Uber is running its own tests right now through partnerships. There is also the arena of autonomous trucking, which itself is a fast growing space that has gotten a lot of funding. Of course, that space hasn't come without hardship, but I want to bring on someone who has been in the arena for nearly a decade. Raquel Urtasun is the founder and CEO of autonomous trucking company Waabi. The company is backed by Coastal Ventures and Raquel's former employer, Uber. They have raised more than $280 million. Raquel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Akash.
So help me understand this. So Waabi designs software that you then install into trucks that then makes them autonomous?
Yeah, the way to think about us is that we are revolutionizing the physical world with a new generation of AI technology. And as it relates to self-driving trucks, it's our first vertical, where the OEM for us, Volvo, provides the base platform, which is the truck that is ready for autonomy. And then we install, sensors, compute, as well as all the software, our proprietary software that drives those trucks autonomously.
And are these trucks on the road yet?
Yes, so we've been, doing commercial operations with our self-driving trucks for over 2 years. We are in Texas, which is kind of ground zero of, self-driving trucking.
Right.
And what you're gonna see by the end of the year is Waabi trucks with no human on board.
By the end
So
of this
very,
year?
very big by the end of this year. And I started the company only 4 years ago, which is, amazing to see, the progress, to date.
And just to be clear, so when I say on the road, so these are just tests that are happening in Texas, or they are literally roaming the highways right now?
Yeah, so they are roaming the highways, doing commercial operations with some of the biggest, shippers and carriers. So really exciting times for us, and just gearing up for the true commercialization, which is when you don't have any human on board. So when it's truly beautiful.
And what kind of companies are you selling these trucks to right now?
So what we have made public is our partnership with Uber Freight. This is a very, very big partnership with billions of miles of committed deployment of the Uber Freight network. And we really like this because Uber Freight sits in the middle of supply and demand when, 1/3 of the Fortune 500 companies can actually get access to Waabi driver technology. We have, other very exciting customers. We just haven't talked publicly about them yet.
I want to talk about sort of how you are testing this technology because, it strikes me that it's a big lift to, put trucks on the road to test them, in sort of a safe way. You guys came out with this new product a little while ago. It's a mixed reality truck simulator is the way they understand it. Help us understand what this simulator is that you built.
Yeah. So when Waabi has been has brought to market very differentiated technology within a simulation first company, and what we just announced is something we've been doing for 2 years, which is not only super important for safety, but it's also the coolest technology out there. And the idea is that we can actually have our self-driving vehicles have the equivalent of augmented reality goggles, so that when they are driving in the physical world, they are actually seeing a world that is not reality, but it's a mixture of reality and virtual, so that they get exposed to all sorts of safety critical scenarios and things as you are driving in the physical world. We do this in a closed course, and this is a massive unlock in terms of being able to test the safety of the system, being able to assess whether we can do things like avoid unavoidable or reduce, for example, the effects of unavoidable accidents, make sure that, we kind of test the safety of the systems to the limit.
But
And
help me understand. I mean, I think it's a neat idea, this virtual reality or mixed reality concept, I should say. I mean, what is the advantage of this as opposed to like just testing it on a closed course, like you said, and having it go through simulations, obstacles, putting, I don't know, like a garbage can on the road or something.
Yeah. So if you look at what traditionally has been done in the industry to date, is that you basically engineer a handful of tests, typically 1 dozen, 2 dozen tests that you do, where it's really like creating a movie stunt, where you see teams with walkie-talkies saying, oh, we're going to test, a vehicle is slowing down in front of us, then go and test this, which is, not scalable, it's not diverse. You cannot really push the safety limits because they are real vehicles or real pedestrians. So consequences of if the system cannot handle it could be tremendous, right? But this is what everybody does in the industry today. That's the equivalent of the safety test for self-driving. So as you can imagine, this is absolutely not sufficient. And then what people do is like, let's go to public roads and let's, just crank miles to see whether you can handle certain situations. But obviously, the rare events, the safety critical, you will need, hundreds of millions, billions to expose, to even see those events once, right? So you don't have a good way of testing. With this augmented reality, with no consequences, we can test all those things in the physical world. Right, so it's a massive unlock.
It's cheaper. So it's much cheaper.
It's cheaper. It's much more efficient.
Right.
For the first time, you can test things that was impossible before, and again, with no consequences in terms of the safety of anybody around. Right, and it's a massive unlock on the industry, and definitely since we have showcased this, it has created a lot of noise and excitement. I will say across every competitor.
Right. Oh, I want to take a step back here. You came from Uber, where you basically helped lead the company's autonomous driving efforts. Of course, we know that those self-driving efforts were sold to a company called Aurora Innovation. They are also doing autonomous trucking. Well, We'll come back to Uber's role in a second. I find it interesting that they're your customer, and they also they sort of sold their stuff to Aurora. But let's focus on you versus Aurora. I mean, what makes Waabi different than what Aurora is doing right now?
Yeah. So the main difference is not on the business model that is similar, is really on the technology, right? And 4 years ago, I started Waabi because I saw a tremendous opportunity in the industry to build a disruptor. And the idea was that, to have very different technology rooted on really addressing the key pain points of the industry. And this was, I would say two theses. One was that we need to really unleash the power of AI and build an end-to-end system, but that is verifiable and that is able to reason. This is before, Tesla or the such were doing any end-to-end approaches, right? And the second was that there is always going to be a data problem, so we need to build a simulator that is the same as reality, the matrix for self-driving.
But I mean, I just want to come. I mean, why is Waabi's technology better than Aurora's?
I mean, Aurora is a traditional approach that is a hand-engineered system that is very unscalable, that has really difficulties in terms of how are you gonna expand that geographically in terms of every bit of progress is harder and harder and harder. And if you look at, and it's very capital intensive, right? Look at the amount of capital that has gone into it and look at, where you are in terms of milestones, etc. If you take Waabi's approach, the advantage is both on the development, which is much faster, as well as much more capital efficient, right? We are, 1/20th of their capital needs, right? But more importantly, our product is better, much better. And this is because we don't need terminals. Thanks to our differentiated approach, we can go to the end customer from day one. That's massive in terms of the economics and the adding in extra complexity that you need with drayage. We can expand geographically much faster. We can expand to different OEMs, form factors, really, really easy, potentially other verticals. And since we are much more capital efficient, we can actually have much better pricing and the product is safer. And we can assess the safety of the system much better with our technology through simulation and this mixed reality testing. So not only is a development advantage, but also the product is really something that addresses much better the customer needs and can be scaled much faster as well. So it's a very interesting time now in terms of how the two companies and and our trajectories are crossing.
Well, and I was going to say, that's the trucking space, but if we look at sort of the autonomous passenger vehicles space, right? You mentioned we've got Waymo, we've got Tesla, Uber is now doing its own test as well. I mean, let's keep trucking aside for a minute. I would love to get your take on sort of the passenger vehicle, autonomous vehicle space. Like, how do you think about that market right now and the different players that are there? I mean, what is your sense about who you think is going to succeed? Tesla has made a huge bet on it. I mean, who do you think wins there?
Yeah, so I will say that I expect not just one winner, but a small handful of winners. I think it's been great to see the deployments on and the scaling of Waymo. I think before there was a question about will customers want this product versus not. There is not anymore that question, and I think that you see as well ride-hailing market also betting in definitely big in self-driving because that's the future, right? I think as you think of who can enter this market and be a real contender, I will boil down to you can't just try to do the same as Waymo and then try to catch up. I think that ship has sailed. I think that what you need to do really is enter with a next generation of technology where capital efficiency is scale, and there is where you can actually really be a contender for that massive market that is from my perspective it's as big as the self-driving trucking market as well. So that's sort of like what I think will happen. We will see over the next couple of years, but it's very interesting to see both robot taxis as well as trucks.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a very interesting time in both of these spaces. You've got a very interesting approach. The mixed reality approach is, I got to be honest, I never would have thought that we would have seen autonomous trucks in mixed reality simulation. It is not an intersection I thought we would have seen. But thank you very much for coming on and explaining it to us. And when more of those trucks are on the road by the end of this year, we're going to have you on, and we're going to do an interview with you in the truck while the truck is driving. I know you said it's driverless, but you're going to be FaceTiming us from there, and we'll do another interview from there. How about that?
Yeah, I think, Akash, you should come and also experience mixed reality on our driverless trucks, so that it will blow your mind. You will see it's amazing to see this live. But happy to showcase our technology live.
Great. Well, thank you, Raquel, for coming on. That is Raquel Urtasun, the founder of Waabi, the autonomous trucking company. Now, for our next guest, AI for let me pause you. AI for healthcare is a booming industry, I should say. We have seen a ton of companies raising money in this space, not the least of which was Ambience Healthcare. The company raised $243 million this week at a $1.25 billion valuation. It was led by Andreessen Horowitz and by Oak HCFT. I am told that stands for Healthcare and FinTech. That's good acronym. I want to bring on Ambience Healthcare's co-founder and chief scientist, Nikhil Baduma, to talk about why he thinks his company will win this race. Nikhil, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here on TITV.
Thank you for having me.
So you guys have this neat platform. I mean, the AI listens to the appointment. It takes all the notes and it produces the chart for the doctor. The doctor can ask it questions. So all this money that you raised, I mean, is it to make those features better, or are there new projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so the platform today, the goal is to really address the holistic clinical workflow for a physician. So that starts before the clinician even walks in the room. It actually looks through the electronic medical record, summarizes the past notes, the labs, the fax documents, into a single dashboard that they need to catch up on the context of the patient. Then, like you said, during the visit, it's listening in the background. It's automatically generating the documentation for the clinician and also a summary for the patient and their family so they understand the care that's happening. And then afterwards, it turns out that healthcare is full of these administrative workflows downstream in revenue cycle, coding and billing, prior auth, which is how health systems get paid. And our technology automates and simplifies a lot of those administrative burdens as well. And so the goal of the platform is to solve for the clinical burden holistically, so clinicians are liberated from the keyboard and they can really just focus on taking care of their patients. I think for us, this funding round is for a couple of things. The first is a big part of how we've been able to do what we do is investing incredibly deeply into the foundation model layer. We work very closely with folks like OpenAI and other foundation model makers to create the most capable models in healthcare and medicine. And so this is going to be an opportunity for us to double down and continue to make sure we have the most capable clinical reasoning models in the market. The second component is we're just seeing an incredible amount of growth. And as you can imagine, healthcare systems need a capable partner on the other side to help them implement and actually realize the full value of AI across their organizations. And so this funding is going to help us make sure that we are able to staff up our care transformation team to help organizations realize the full value of the AI technology.
How many doctors are using your product right now?
It's rapidly growing. We work with about 40 plus different healthcare institutions, including folks like Cleveland Clinic, UCSF, Houston Methodist. I'll give you an example. Cleveland Clinic, 80% of all their clinicians use Ambience every single day in clinic. They use Ambience for 70% of their visits. So
it's on in the background for 80% of the physicians at Cleveland Clinic. It's transcribing, right. It's taking the notes right now as it is.
That's right. And if you're in San Francisco, you walk into UCSF, chances are your clinician is using Ambience in the background as well.
And I mean, so after the, I'm just imagining how I use AI. I mean, presumably these doctors have to go in and edit these notes after, right? I mean, there must be some hallucinations involved or errors or stuff like that.
I think the clinician is indeed responsible for the fidelity and integrity of everything that ultimately ends up in the medical record. That's for sure. But the level of precision and accuracy that we've been able to build into these models across the 100+ different subspecialties that are at an academic medical center like a UCSF or a Cleveland Clinic, we're getting to a place where we're taking the time that clinicians are spending after hours charting from 2-3 hours a day
Hmm.
and boiling it down to maybe 20-30 minutes in total. And so, yeah, there's still a review process that's really important, but the feedback from clinicians is that it feels like the technology is reading their mind because it so deeply understand the care that's being delivered in that room.
And do the patients know that when I walk in to see my physician, do they know that I'm being recorded?
They do. So normally the conversation goes somewhat like this. Akash, I'm your physician. I actually have this piece of AI software that's going to be taking notes.
Okay, so there is a permit. Yeah, there is a.
We can focus on you. That's right.
Right. Okay. So look, I want to come back to the product. It's a very interesting product. I do want to talk about sort of the landscape at large for these AI healthcare, charting transcription tools. I mean, it's a very competitive space. Our readers know the name Abridge very well. They've raised money at a $5.3 billion valuation. They have this partnership with Epic. Microsoft obviously has Nuance. So how is it that Ambience is going to win against these giants?
I think there's a couple of different pieces. In our space, we've got a ton of companies. You named a couple that are building point solutions. Some point solutions for before the clinical workflow starts. Some point solutions to listen to the conversation and produce documentation. Some point solutions for aspects of revenue cycle encoding and billing. I think one of the things that we've done effectively is actually build a single platform with shared context that holistically solves the problem across the entire continuum before, during, and after the visit. On top of that, you think about the academic medical centers in this country, like Cleveland Clinic or UCSF, they're home to 100+ different specialty and subspecialty areas. Turns out, in those specialties, the medicine being practiced is different. The workflows are different, both the split of responsibilities between the staff, as well as the actual integrations inside of the EHR, and then the downstream administrative rules are different. And it turns out that the differences are so significant that it's almost like building a completely different product for every single one of these specialty and subspecialty areas to actually address those needs. And so while there's a lot of excitement in our space around AI to solve the clinical workflow, if you walk into the average health system today, the vast majority of clinicians are living like it is a pre-AI world, and most clinicians don't have a tool that they can actually use. And so the kinds of sort of utilization numbers we're talking about at Cleveland Clinic, at UCSF, they're unheard of in the rest of the market, probably 2 to 3 times higher. And a big part of that is really perfecting our ability to address the clinical needs across the sort of wide range of specialty areas in a health system.
So in short, where Abridge might have this big partnership with Epic, your approach is Ambience is trying to go, directly to the health systems and develop technology that works a bit better from the doctor's end, I guess. I mean, you're really focused on those specialties, is what I'm understanding.
100%. And you think about most of the major health systems in the country, they understand that the AI layer is a major strategic initiative. And so they're actually testing all the solutions in the market. Cleveland Clinic last year took 5 of the major vendors in our sector, put them all side by side, ran a significant evaluation, published the results actually, and used that as the foundation to decide what is the platform for their long-term sort of AI strategy. And the same we're seeing is playing out across the country. It's not really about who gets there first, who signs a pilot first. It's about who can drive system level utilization and real outcomes and ROI in a world in which health systems need results, not narrative.
Your role at the company, you've co-founded the company, you are a chief scientist. What is the biggest technical challenge that you are facing right now?
I think the biggest challenge for us is the gap between general purpose reasoning models and models that are actually clinical grade and compliance grade and can operate in sort of the wide range of settings inside of a health system it's vast. The last mile problem you'll hear people talk about in healthcare is one of the most challenging sort of vertical AI problems in existence. And so that's part of the reason why we've had to invest incredibly deeply in R&D and the engineering infrastructure for training models to actually bridge that gap between where sort of foundation models are today versus how they need to be useful for clinicians in the front lines.
Got it. So the last mile you're talking about is taking that model and then making it specific for a healthcare setting. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. The post-training that's required to actually make sure the clinical reasoning, the administrative reasoning is at the level required to get to that clinical grade and compliance grade requirement for a healthcare use case.
Right. Last question for you. Is your software also giving treatment recommendations to doctors?
We currently don't have any features that are doing treatment recommendations. We have a couple of announcements coming up soon around clinical decision support. That's a very exciting space. But for the time being, our technology is mostly used to support the clinical workflow and automate the administrative burden as opposed to make a diagnostic decision.
And so, what do you see the role of the doctor then in this world where AI can give treatment recommendations?
Well, I think the exciting part about being a physician is in the past, you lived in this world where you would walk in the room, you couldn't look your patient in the eye. If you had to go look something up, you'd have to step out of the room to actually look up reference material. And there's a version of the world coming within the next 2 to 3 years, where as a clinician, you could walk into that room, you get to have a face-to-face conversation with the patient, and everything you need to know is sort of magically and ambiently brought up in the background. So you're not sort of searching for the right information. You can focus on building an authentic relationship, helping make good decisions together, looking over the options for someone's care, and then ultimately sort of tying in both what's the right clinical thing to do, but also what's the right thing to do for this person given their context and their socioeconomic background and their preferences.
Right. Well, look, it's a fascinating landscape here. Like I said, there are so many AI healthcare companies in this space. Congratulations on the fundraise this week. I'm really excited to see how things pan out, and I look forward to having you on the show again. That is Nikhil Baduma, the co-founder and chief scientist of Ambience Healthcare. For our next guest, every day there is more and more discussion about how companies are dealing with the growing proliferation of AI agents. The big tech companies are no different. Amazon is finding new ways to ward off agents from Google, Perplexity, Anthropic, ChatGPT. And I want to bring on our e-commerce reporter, Anne Guillen, who wrote a great story this morning, diving deep into these agent wars. Anne, welcome to TITV.
Hey, Akash. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to talk agents and e-commerce, and I'm also ready to talk about, perhaps how I could be using some of them for my own shopping needs. But I mean, let's start with the story that you wrote this morning. What was it? Tell us the gist of the story.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, one of the most common uses for AI agents that we keep hearing about is e-commerce. So, whether you're researching and buying a new pair of running shoes, kitchen gadgets, party supplies, booking flights, travel, things like that, these use cases are something that companies love to talk about. These are the things we're all going to be using AI agents for. And up until now, we've seen e-commerce companies like Amazon, like Shopify, try to remain pretty open and avoid defining too clearly an agent strategy. Since we're pretty early stage here, this tech is super new, and they aren't used super widely for e-commerce yet. But if agents do really take off, that could mean a lot of shoppers stop going directly to sites like Amazon, like Shopify merchant sites, and just use agents or chatbots to do all of their browsing and shopping for them. And so that would be a pretty big deal, since retailers really, really need this data that comes from people going directly to their websites. They need it for marketing, advertising, pricing, and merchandising decisions. So, what I reported in my story today is we're seeing companies like Amazon start to take some initial steps to try to protect that a little bit and prevent agents from totally cutting them out of the shopping process. So, I reported today that Amazon has quietly added some language to its website code in the past couple of weeks that says that Google's agents are not allowed to access its site. And other e-commerce companies are starting to make similar moves. So Shopify recently did something similar to keep agents away from specifically the checkout pages on its sites, making it so that you can't use an agent to automatically complete a checkout for you.
Right.
So these companies are definitely making some early moves now to try to assert some control before agents really do take off, to try to carve out some space and make sure that they don't get totally cut out of the shopping process.
I want to come to Shopify in a second, but let's go back to Amazon and Google. So when you say Amazon has added language to prevent Google's agents from accessing the site, language, like is that code saying we are not allowing it, or is it just a recommendation?
Sure. So it's in what's called the robots.txt robots.txt file. And historically, this has been really important for SEO and search optimization, but it's becoming kind of an interesting indicator for how people are thinking about agents as well. So Amazon updated their robots.txt file saying that Google's Project Mariner agent isn't allowed to access its site. So that's not a legally binding, hard and fast rule, but it's generally interpreted as kind of a signal of what these companies expect in terms of bots and agents coming to their site, kind of the expectations that they have for.
And just to sort of come full circle with this, so does this mean that Google cannot access the sites now, or just that it's like a handshake agreement that they won't?
It's more of a handshake. We've seen in the past that Google has said it abides by robots.txt instructions.
Okay.
So I assume we'll see them take the same approach here. The company didn't say anything specifically when I asked them about that, but historically they've followed those rules in the past.
Got it. Well, I mean, let's talk about some of the other companies that are in the space. You talked about Shopify. Shopify has actually partnered with some of these agent companies, and they've seemed to have taken a little bit more of a proactive approach, saying, we want to work with these agents. So, are they for agents, or are they kind of against them in the way that you said some of the other companies might be?
Sure. Shopify is taking a little bit more of a middle ground here. It seems like they're a little bit more open to agents coming onto their sites, but they also want to set some ground rules. So an important thing to know here is Shopify's major business, even though they're known for helping merchants set up and run their websites, is payments processing. So more than 75% of their revenue last year came from a division it calls Merchant Solutions, which is all of the add-on services besides the basic website hosting. And a huge piece of that revenue is processing the payments for all of the millions of transactions on their sites. So Shopify has restricted, the rules that they're setting to checkout so far. And so that's an indicator they want to be really protective of this checkout process and make sure that, agents aren't buying things without people's permission or buying the wrong items, or, instead of buying one pair of running shoes, they're buying 10 pairs of running shoes before the shopper has a chance to review it. So Shopify is definitely a little bit more open. The Financial Times reported a couple of weeks ago that OpenAI is weighing adding Shopify checkout buttons to some ChatGPT chat windows. Shopify has a similar deal already with Perplexity, where you can check out using Shopify's checkout directly from Perplexity search results for some users. So this is something that we've seen Shopify do with other kind of new ways of shopping or browsing before. They did a similar kind of partnership integration with TikTok Shop.
Right.
So Shopify historically has been pretty willing to work with these new platforms and been pretty early to want to make a deal with these platforms to get their checkout in there.
Right. Let's bring it back to you and I very quickly. What does all this mean for people shopping online?
Sure. So, like I said, this is still very early stage. We're not seeing agents go out and buy your weekly grocery order yet, but that's definitely coming. So for now, this means that the products that you see, ChatGPT or Perplexity or Google's Project Mariner start to recommend or pull up in their search results, that might be a little bit limited as especially Amazon kind of clamps down on access. So I actually searched earlier this week for best Amazon kitchen gadgets on both ChatGPT and Perplexity, and both wouldn't pull up direct links to Amazon. So it does seem like they're abiding by
the handshake agreement. There's the handshake agreement. The robots.txt handshake agreement. I love it.
Right. I asked specifically, I want links to Amazon, and it was still pulling up other retailers like Macy's, Walmart. So that product selection might be a little bit limited, but I suspect in the future we will see Amazon have, some kind of solution to this, and I suspect it'll likely be, beefing up their own AI tools, but also could be partnerships with OpenAI, with Perplexity, I think
Right.
just Amazon's still trying to figure out, what exactly their strategy is going to be.
Great. Well, look, it's a pretty interesting space, and I'm excited to see how it pans out. Thank you, Anne, for coming on the show and explaining it to us. That is Anne Guillen, our e-commerce reporter at The Information. That does it for today's show. A reminder that we are live on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for tomorrow's show. So until next time, bye-bye for now.